Hello and welcome to Busy Pro Fast Wellness. I had my first guest on this podcast, the first of hopefully many, who was absolutely fabulous. Jake Jones, who happens to be the piano player and singer in our duo Jackal, which is now playing as I speak in the background. I'll leave a link in the show notes should you be interested in checking out any more of that. But we spoke for just a long time, 42 minutes in the end, that I decided to split this into two parts, which might seem a little unorthodox, but, well, why not? And that means that next week we'll be talking about internal family systems. And this week we talk about the situation of the awful Valencia floods that occurred at the end of last month. And we stray off from that onto the topic of habit formation and obsessive behaviour when it comes to music, and that sort of fed into athletics and the mindset of the great top athletes as well. And is there any correlation, I guess, between obsessive behaviour when it comes to music and sport and other disciplines as well, which might be in the more creative line? So plenty to get your mind into as we go forward, and I hope that you enjoy the podcast. See you on the other side. Thank you and welcome. And I've got here with me Jake Jones, who happens to be my partner in crime when it comes to Jackal. Jackal is a group that we've been running for 2 or 3 years now. Is that right?
2 or 3 years, I would say.
Yeah. We haven't really played that many gigs, but we have rehearsed many times, and we've spent so many times probably during those rehearsals speaking more than actually playing.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. We don't want to ruin it and tell everyone our secret.
So I thought he would be the perfect guest for the first time. He's a mean keyboard player as well. So absolutely.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for letting me be your first guest as well. It is an honour and a privilege.
Well, we've talked a lot about wellness techniques, etc. They've come naturally into the conversations over the years. So I thought you would be the perfect guest. So obviously recently it's been quite difficult because we've been up against it in the sense of what's happened in Valencia with the flooding. And it's meant that that's been really hard emotionally for so many people. It's been absolutely devastating. What's the emotional damage, and how do you think that people have managed to cope in these situations? We'll look at maybe some strategies that could possibly be used in order for people to get out and at least see some light at the end of this awful tunnel that they've been dragged through.
Exactly, yeah. And I think for a lot of people, I know certainly for myself, because I chose to live in Valencia because right from the moment I first visited Valencia in 2016, I decided that it was my favourite place on earth. And so it was kind of like a love affair from there. And a lot of friends back in the old country were saying, maybe the novelty will wear off eventually. But after 5 years of living here now, it feels like one of those really functional marriages where you still actually bother to kiss each other in the morning and that kind of stuff. So the love affair has lasted. And when you really love a place, when it's a place not just that you just happen to end up in, but you really chose to be, then any kind of, and by a place, I guess I'm talking about definitely the geographical location, but also the community and the culture and the history and all of those things that come with it. Just the kind of the general vibe of the people who live there. And when you kind of fall in love with a place like that and it gets harmed, then it does feel very similar to how when an individual person who you love gets harmed, you feel very sort of violated and very hurt and very protective. And so, especially with the political situation as well, which isn't the thrust of this particular chat, but the idea that a lot of it could have been avoided too, it does make you extremely angry and very sad. And the decision, I know that you've been volunteering as well, because we were out on the same day on one of the days too. It's the decision to do that isn't really a decision when you feel that strongly about a community and about something like that. I mean, you've lived here for a very long time as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been here for 9 years now, so quite a lot longer. But for the same reasons, I fell in love. It's like so many people here, and having this affinity with this place and this happening. I mean, I've never been in a situation where I felt such emotional depths of despair because of what's happened. And I felt the same way. I think you have to do something. We've got to do something. There's no remedy. We have to try and do our small part, each of us, if at all possible. And of course, there's a proliferation of information at the time. It wasn't that easy to navigate through all of this because there were so many people and nobody knew what they were doing. No. And then, of course, now things are more organised. Now the professionals have stepped in, and
to a degree.
There
are still a lot of places where they aren't. But I think also what it's proven is how well people can organise themselves without necessarily having some higher governing body to coordinate everything. It seems just like, at one point I was comparing it, and I don't mean this in any disrespectful way, quite the opposite, but it felt like when we were in our multitudes down there just trying to clean things up and to just excavate through the mud, it was like ants eating a sandwich, in the way that there's no actual sort of overall body which says to these ants, you need to go here and eat the jam, you need to eat the crust.
No.
Everyone's just sort of walking around finding things to do and just doing them. And so we find our level automatically.
Exactly.
And I thought it was really beautiful, the fact that human beings can do that.
It was really heartening to see that. You can see these little ants crossing the bridges, with it felt like the pitchforks of old times, walking along these bridges, with their shovels and their spades and their brooms and whatever else, with no real plan and not knowing exactly where to go. And that was just wonderful to see.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like talking about this kind of stuff and talking about the emotional effect that we feel. Obviously, we both live more in the city centre, and I know you're more close to the coast, but neither of us live anywhere which was directly immediately affected. Our houses and our possessions weren't affected. I mean, we both know people who have lost everything, including loved ones. But in talking about the emotional effects on us, you get like survivor's guilt a little bit as well.
Yeah.
And that's another thing to address, and to not feel, and to have compassion for yourself for as well, I think.
Yeah.
But it
does feel that you're emotionally, there's a sort of sense of turmoil within your own soul, because on the one hand you're going over, you're seeing all this devastation, and you cross over the bridge, people are in cafes, and you're thinking, wow,
how the other half live.
And it's just it's just a surreal melange of these two worlds intertwining themselves, and it seems too surreal for words.
Yeah, absolutely. I said on the first day that we went out, when we came back into the city, we were completely covered in mud, and we stopped for a beer on the way home and sat on a terrace. And when I went in to use the bathroom, I just walked through this restaurant, just like leaving bits of mud on the floor behind me. And I wasn't carrying my shovel at that point. I kind of wish I was, for the extra absurdity of the scene. But it felt very odd. And I was saying when I came out of the bathroom, I was like, the closer we get to the centre of the city and the later it gets into the evening, the less appropriate it is to still be covered in mud and carrying around a broom and a shovel with you. And so you can be like on the outskirts, but quite where the damage happened, quite late in the evening, and you can still be covered in mud. Or you can be closer into the city, but it's earlier on in the day when everyone was out there working, and still be covered in mud. But both, that's not quite so good.
I think there was a point, though, wasn't there, during the protests where people were out there, and you were out, and you were wielding your brooms and stuff, to make that point.
To still be covered in mud and the broom, and that, like the pitchfork reference you just made, it felt a little bit like that. It's good to brandish some kind of tool at any kind of protest, isn't it? And if I had a flaming torch, I would have brought it, but that probably wouldn't have. It might have escalated the situation with the police a little bit, maybe. I don't know.
I think so.
But that was very important, and that was a very emotional evening as well for everyone, for all, what was it, 130, 140,000 people. That was the estimate. I think it might have been more, to be honest. I think a lot of the figures in all of this have been exaggerated one way or the other, and not in the favour of the people.
No, of course not.
But yeah, that was an extremely...
I haven't asked, were you there when it sort of kicked off a bit later on?
Yeah, I was lying on the floor, actually. Like, there was a sit-down point on Plaza de la Virgen, and we were all sitting down. And then suddenly there were people screaming, and there was a stampede in our direction, so we quickly got to our feet. And I took a video at the time, not for disaster tourism reasons, but for documenting the situation, because it's very important in this day and age that we live in to utilise that democracy of information that we have at our disposal to film things. And Yeah, it was suddenly the vibration of the atmosphere just completely changed, and there were riot police with their truncheons and shields, like chasing people, like sort of not. I wouldn't call it kettling at that point, but people were kind of stampeding in the other direction, and yeah, we sort of we held the line for a little while, and then we saw that other protesters were throwing bottles and stuff like that, and it was like, okay, so this is starting to get a bit wary now. And so we stepped back, and we didn't leave completely, but we just sort of stepped back and to a more peaceful, like it's like there are like strata of different vibrations within protests, aren't there? Like at the front, there's the people making these iconic photos of like of protesters like facing off against the riot shields of the police, and then at the back, you've just got more people holding the placard and having a beer in the other hand, kind of thing, and everything in between. So we sort of moved back through the strata to the less kind of hands-on kind of parts. And at one point, it felt like the thread of aggression was kind of following us back, and we ended up. This was quite a lot later on. We decided to leave, and we went and sat on a terrace with a beer, and then the hostility kind of spread to there. The next thing you knew, the riot police were running through the square, Plaza de la Reina, which is very close, and they were like running amongst the tables and stuff like that, and everyone was screaming. And so we went inside the bar that we were in, and the guy closed the doors, and there was this poor young waiter out the front who was just packing away the tables and stuff like that hurriedly, and it was like, why does he have to be out there doing that? We brought in our glasses and stuff at least.
Yeah.
And then we thought it would be a lock-in, and the guy, the owner, would use that opportunity to sort of keep the custom going. But he actually threw us out. And things were getting quite leery outside. There were like bin lids being thrown and stuff like that. And he threw us out. And there was a family. There was some kids like 8 or 9 years old with their parents like trying to get in for shelter. And he was like, no, I don't want my windows to be broken. Okay. And we were saying, just close the blinds, close the metal shutters, and we'll keep drinking. We'll pay you. And no, we were out. So we had to sneak our way to our respective houses. And at one point, I remember being there with my friends, and we were like had our backs against the wall, just kind of sliding through this street, hands up in the air. I was worried I might have to give up my broom that I was using to brandish, because obviously it looks a bit more threatening, and you don't want to look threatening. It reminded me a lot of my childhood growing up in a small village where I used to, on the way home from school, I used to walk through a field with bullocks in it, and you'd had to, when you walk through a field with bullocks, you have to not establish eye contact and just kind of not look like a threat, and just keep yourself calm, keep everything about your gestures to be calm. And with the riot police, it was kind of that kind of, it reminded me a lot of that. And so, yeah, just like, I'm going to keep my nice broom and just, we're just walking home. That's it. And yeah, we made it. But I saw people being treated with like, I don't know, like broken bones or or bruises or whatever. There was like ambulances treating people at the side of the road.
Oh,
and
really?
Things did get very
okay. So it's always hard to know exactly what happened when you're looking at the YouTube footage, etc. So you're not really getting the whole picture, and you're reading various news reports, and so it's good to hear what happened
as always,
an eyewitness.
It is stunning, like looking at the footage, because every source, if they want to promote the side of the police, they'll just show the protesters throwing bottles. If they want to promote the protesters, they'll show the police beating them up. And they just cherry pick everything. It's very hard to find. You have to be there. You just have to be there.
It's amazing that your description there went from bullocks in a field to full-on riot police. Brandishing utensils, that you might possibly, obviously not use, of course, but that's incredible.
Well, that's the moment. I mean, walking home from school, there were moments where the bullocks would start to chase you, and then you would just floor it and run for it to the edge of the field. Okay, that does happen. But So there we go. So it's been very emotional for everybody, and I don't mean to invalidate or belittle the people who have lost.
No, crikey, no.
Lost everything. Over 100,000 cars have been lost. The official death toll is about 250 odd, but
when I
must be more.
When I first saw, from looking at photos just after the first day when it happened, the floods, and I thought it was artificial intelligence. I could not believe these cars all piled up. No, there's no way. And I remember just chatting to somebody. He said, no, this is real. Mm-hmm. This is absolutely how it was. And it was only when I went down with Zoe a couple of days later, and then we witnessed it in Alpha Far, how bad it was. incredible, you know. So, no, it's been a dreadful situation, and it's just obviously it's going to continue, and it continue for months, if not years. I mean, the emotional scars that are going to be left from this, well, you know, it's never ending, really. But on the other hand, you know, the operation, little by little, and the camaraderie that has been shown has been second to none. And, you know, it's always difficult to find some sort of silver lining out of all these tragedies. And you think, how can you turn this into a gift? You know, and that's often the case. This is a disaster. This has happened in life. How can we change those into some sort of positivity? And that's what we're sort of striving to do. But the camaraderie is something, and people have come together. And there has been obviously a lot of backlash towards the government, which is, you know, the recently elected, you know, local government here in the province of Valencia. So let's hope. I don't think that any heads are going to roll at the top, because they never do. No. But they're going to probably, you know, there's the voices have been heard.
Oh yeah.
And I'm hoping that something will happen. I don't know if you've got any thoughts about what will happen, but it'd be nice if there was like some sackings. Anyway, so that's a lot about Valencia. I mean, possibly we should sort of shift off slightly. I mean, I'd like to ask you a little bit about, because you mentioned it's something I don't know anything about, and it's something that you've been pursuing recently. It's IFS. I mean,
IFS, yeah.
But I don't know what this is. No idea.
IFS. So I don't want to be too much of an authority on it, because I am very much the patient in this. But I also have an obsessive nature anyway, so I like to research things in general.
But that works for music, doesn't it? Anyway, because I mean, if you need to put in the hours, and you need to be laser focused in order to make those
neurodivergently hyper-focused.
Yes.
Neurospicily hyper-focused,
yeah. The morning routines, getting up, you know, and just getting it and making sure that you are focused. And whatever you do, it doesn't have to be music, but anything creative often is the case, if you can actually focus on those things. So, yeah.
Well, I remember when we first started playing together, one of the first talks we had in our long rehearsal talks was about the relationship between being a musician and being somewhere on some kind of autistic spectrum. And I was saying, you know, like the idea to be an effective musician, you can't just be passionate about music. You've also got to, like with anything, like with lifting weights or surfing or making a perfect baked Alaska, you can't just want the goal, the objective, the end point. You've got to actually enjoy the repetitive process that happens in the middle, in between. So in order to be an effective musician, most of the time, you have to be in a situation where you're content to lock yourself in a room, usually on your own, and just repeatedly just go for hours and hours and hours all the time. And that is not neurotypical, is it? That's not normal.
No, that's not normal at all. You know, I agree with you wholeheartedly on everything you said, except the part of enjoyment, because it's something which you have to do, and it's like if you're doing those weights, you're doing those reps. I mean, some of the greatest athletes, etc., have talked about the fact that it's the monotony of it, but they know they have to do that in order to get to that next level, and to get to that super high level. It's just to get in there and do that, and they might not enjoy it, but they know it's for a purpose.
Well, that's very interesting, because I think that's where you and I differ, and I quite like that there's that diversity of motivation there, because for me, knowing that I'm going to get better isn't enough on its own. I have to actually enjoy it as I'm doing it.
Ideally,
but I have to.
Yeah. Oh no, I see.
Otherwise, I can't do it. And so, like, you and I are both very keen runners, and I've only been running myself for 2 years, but I was absolutely elated because I enjoyed it. I enjoy running the small distances, the long distances. I just enjoy putting one foot in front of the other, and it just gives me immense pleasure, and it makes me smile. On the way back from a run, I'm giggling to myself because of the endorphins.
Yeah.
And if it was bad for me, I would still do it.
Yeah.
So it's just lucky that it's good for me.
That's a perfect situation where you can actually enjoy the process as well. If you can bring that into the equation.
Ideally, but I think I'm not motivated enough by any end point of any kind.
No, but it's the process. It doesn't really matter about the end point. I mean, you can have a goal in order to go through the process, but it's the process, it's the voyage that's important, really, isn't it?
Exactly, it's the journey.
You know, So, no, I mean, this is something which James Clear talks about in his book, Atomic Habits, is if you can actually have that. But he also talks about the other side of the monotony of doing it. But then, in that situation, those athletes will know that there is a reason for that incremental improvement on those daily habits.
Yes.
That will bring that, final result, hopefully, or not. I know I'm never going to be a world-class trumpet player, but I know that
you are.
But I've certainly, I have over the years enjoyed the process, and not so much depending on where I've been at the time. And now I am super focusing on things, and I'm noticing improvement. So that for me is bringing me enjoyment.
Yes, that's true, isn't it? That's a good point.
I've got motivation to do it. Yeah.
Maybe then we could say that at its core, it has to be enjoyable, but you can pepper it with you can season it with a bit of hard work as well.
Yeah.
But if it's something, I mean, for me, like doing strength exercises, it's something I've never been able to stick to. I love having done it. There's that quote from Mark Twain where he said, a classic piece of literature is a book that no one wants to read, but everyone wants to have read. And I feel that way about a lot of like strength exercises. I want to have done them, definitely.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be doing them. I don't want to have them still to do.
No. And there's always that relief when you've actually finished them, you've done the reps, and you think, right.
Oh, that's a great feeling.
Yeah,
that's the most smug feeling in the world. Yeah. But it's getting to that point. And so I think at its core, you have to enjoy it. But you can sort of tweak and course correct in various ways, perhaps, based on things that you need to do.
Well, part of the premise of the whole thing that I'm doing for my podcast is small, tiny routines that you can do on a day-to-day basis, and so which are fitness and wellness related.
Yeah.
So obviously, I have an interest in that sort of.
Well, that's what I like about what you do as well, because I think the biggest unique selling point of these podcasts is that the fact that they're bite-sized and they're so short, and it's not a big commitment, especially in this day and age. And I'm one of the guiltiest people I know for this. I don't really watch films, I don't really read books, but I read articles and I watch clips. And everyone's getting more like shorter and shorter attention span. Yeah. This is common knowledge. We all talk about this. And so to ride that wave, and
the weapons of mass distraction,
yeah,
which is happening to us all, isn't it, really?
Yeah, so why not make that distraction a good thing? Again, enjoy the process.
Yeah. Okay, great. Anyway, sorry, we're going to talk about IFS.
We've gone off on a branch, haven't we?
Well, thank you for listening to Busy Pro Fast Wellness with me, Alan Welch. This is only part 1 of this particular interview, and we will be revisiting the second part of the interview with Jake Jones next week. So, until then, goodbye for now.